WXLE, Indian Lake. It's 8 o'clock.
Good morning. This is Northern Light for Monday, July 24th. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
People fleeing from other countries to seek asylum in the U.S. and Canada have been in the news all year. We'll follow a young couple on their journey from Venezuela up through the North Country and into Canada.
No importa mucho el país.
The country doesn't really matter to us. What matters is the ability to work and make money. If you can't make money, how are you supposed to help your family?
Also, Governor Kathy Hochul says she's taking matters into her own hands to try to solve the affordable housing crisis.
I will not wait. This neighborhood will not wait. And the state of New York will not wait. So I'm going to do everything I can within my powers, using every tool I can find, the ones I'm announcing today and the ones we haven't even thought of yet. We're going to jumpstart housing now.
And as part of our series on birds and birding, we'll meet a summer intern at the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation and hear her story of a love for birding. All of that and more is coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by the Village Mercantile, Saranac Lake, partnering with local nonprofit organizations to sell their merchandise through their e-commerce store. More at villagemerc.com. And by Apothecary Chocolates, making gourmet chocolates by hand from all natural herbs, botanicals, tree syrups. apothecarychocolates.com.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. People fleeing from other countries to seek asylum in the U.S. and Canada, and sometimes ending up in the North Country, have been in the news all year. Illegal crossings along the southern border are down following policy changes. On the northern border, Canada closed a popular and internationally known unofficial crossing known as Roxham Road. That little road in northern Clinton County was used by thousands of migrants as a pathway to asylum for the last 5 years. We wanted to know more about how people get to Roxham Road and what their lives are like before and after they cross into Canada. So we followed one couple whose journey began in Venezuela. Kara Chapman has their story.
When you ask Luis Rangel and Maria Angel Diaz if they're married, this is what they say.
Sí, no.
Yes and no, they say.
We've been together for 12 years, but we're not legally or religiously married. But we've been en concubinato.
That's kind of like a common law marriage. The two are originally from Venezuela. It's where they had their two sons, ages 5 and 8. Diaz says it's the best country in the world, with its tropical climate, beaches, and the charisma of its people. But for years, the country's been plagued by rampant inflation, crime, and political persecution. Rangel says he spoke out against it.
When there were marches in Venezuela, I was one of the people who went out and protested because I didn't agree with what was happening in our country.
Rangel says that put him in danger. So he, Diaz, and their children left Venezuela for Ecuador 3 years ago. Rangel says he found work as a driver, but he wasn't making enough money to help family who were still in Venezuela, like his mother and 2 other children he has. So last October, he and Diaz decided to leave. They saved some money, left their 2 sons with Diaz's mother, and headed north.
So we made the decision to seek a better future, to be able to help our family in Venezuela, us, and the babies we left in Ecuador.
The couple first traveled through Colombia, making their way to a place called the Darien Gap, which straddles the border with Panama. In the immigration world, this place is infamous. It's a remote, roadless crossing with dozens of miles of dense rainforest, steep mountains, and vast swamps. And it's the only overland path that connects South and Central America. It took 7 days. Just slogging through that forest was hard enough. But Rangel says it got worse. They got robbed and left without any money. When they came out on the other side of the Darien Gap in Panama, they met up with two of Rangel's family members. They took them in, and the next day, Rangel and Diaz continued on their journey.
Sin plata, no importa. Ellos nos regalaron $100 y con eso llegamos a frontera con Costa Rica.
The family gave them $100 to get to Costa Rica. It was there around mid-October that they learned the United States had changed things for Venezuelans. Basically, the Biden administration opened 24,000 slots for Venezuelans to legally enter the country if they had a U.S. sponsor. Those who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border illegally wouldn't be eligible and would be turned back if they were caught. But Rangel says at that point, it was too late to turn back.
We were already in Costa Rica. What were we going to do? We weren't going to leave and go back through the jungle. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone.
So he and Diaz continued north. They made their way from town to town in Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala selling candy. It helped them pay for transportation, lodging, food, and occasionally guides to help them cross the borders. Rangel says they always met people willing to help them along the way.
Like in our country, people in Honduras and Nicaragua didn't have a lot of resources. But even though they had little, people always helped us.
They eventually made it to Mexico, where they were briefly detained by immigration officials. But on January 1st, they passed through a hole in the border wall into El Paso, Texas. They worked and made their way to Denver, then took a bus to New York City. They were given assistance for several days. Friends gave Rangel an electric bike so he could work by making deliveries, but the bike broke. It was during this time that they started hearing about a tiny road that crosses into Canada here in Clinton County. They heard on TikTok and Facebook that it would be easier to get set up and find work in Canada.
The country doesn't really matter to us. What matters is the ability to work and make money. If you can't make money, how are you supposed to help your family? We need to send money to our family.
Diaz and Rangel got help getting a bus ticket to the Mountain Mart, a Greyhound bus station in Plattsburgh. From there, they took a taxi to Roxham Road.
El 14 de febrero, el Día de los Enamorados.
It was February 14th, Valentine's Day. Rangel says he remembers people lining up at the unofficial crossing and Canadian officers telling them to stop, that they would be arrested if they crossed. Like thousands before them, they went ahead. They walked the tiny dirt path to enter Canada. We asked Rangel how he felt that day, crossing at Roxham Road. He turns the question back on us.
How would you feel after abandoning everything? How would you feel after abandoning your family, your children, your things? It's difficult. Here we don't know anyone. We don't have a family. We don't have anything. Nothing. Here we're starting from scratch or below scratch.
They were processed, fingerprinted, and given paperwork. And the day they left Canadian immigration authorities, the couple got some news as well. Diaz, who had walked miles through a rainforest, traversed 2 continents, was pregnant. She thought she was just feeling poorly because of her menstrual cycle.
It wasn't in our plans, but a baby is always a blessing.
Rangel, Diaz, and their unexpected baby arrived in Canada when the Quebec government was calling for asylum seekers to be placed elsewhere. Leaders said the tens of thousands of people, most of whom came through Roxham Road, were overwhelming the province and its NGOs. So, instead of Montreal, where thousands of migrants were already awaiting their asylum claims, Rangel and Diaz were sent to Niagara Falls in Ontario. When we first spoke with the couple in March, they were dealing with a bunch of challenges. They didn't have Canadian phones, which made it really difficult to connect with resources and the authorities processing their asylum claim. There are fewer groups that help refugees in Niagara Falls than in places like Toronto and Montreal. And Rangel told us about how much he just wanted to work.
I'm the type of person who doesn't like to be given things. I need to make money because aside from the children I have with my wife, I have other people to help, 2 more children. I can't spend 3 or 4 months standing around doing nothing.
But that's basically what happened. They couldn't get jobs before they had work permits because they could have lost the food and housing assistance they get from the Canadian government. So they spent their time knocking on doors to set up appointments, snapping pictures around Niagara Falls, and waiting in their hotel room. They've been sending what they can to their sons and other family back in South America. They want to send more. Luis Rangel finally got his work permit last month. He's got a job interview in August, but he's still sending around his resume. Maria Angel Diaz says they've made some other gains as well.
que sí hemos logrado varias cositas. Por ejemplo, podemos abrir una cuenta de banco.
She says they can open a bank account, they have a social worker, they can sign up for English classes, and they finally have Canadian phones. Rangel says from what he's seen, there are a lot of opportunities in Canada. Again and again, when we spoke with him, he said you have to be patient.
Plans are long-term. No plan is short-term. Everything has its time. If you want it, it'll come. You just have to know how to wait for it.
That goes for bringing more of their family to Canada, too. Rangel says they have to wait until they have legal status before they can send for their boys. In the meantime, they wait for the arrival of their new baby, another boy, and for their asylum claim to move forward. Kara Chapman, with interpretation and translation from David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 8:11. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up in just a minute, our series on birders in the North Country continues. That's in just a few minutes right here on Northern Light.
Potsdam pianist Matt Bullwinkle. Check out more of his music, part of our Underscore project, online. Visit us at ncpr.org/underscore. Northern Light is supported by Adirondack Experience, the museum on Blue Mountain Lake, presenting a full season of events and activities, now open 7 days a week. Tickets at theadkx.org. And by Seagull Festival in Scroon Lake, bringing opera and musical theater to the Adirondack since 1915. More at seagullfestival.org.
Last week, Governor Kathy Hochul announced she's taking matters into her own hands to try and solve the affordable housing crisis. She says her fellow Democrats in the Senate and Assembly did not act during the 2023 legislative session. From Albany, Karen DeWitt has more context.
Hochul, at the start of the session back in the winter, introduced an ambitious plan to build 800,000 new housing units in the next decade. But it failed to gain traction among Democrats in the legislature. Suburban members objected to a provision that would allow the state to override local zoning laws in some cases. Hochul withdrew the proposal from the state budget. Later, Senate and Assembly leaders offered a new plan. It included tenant protections like the good cause eviction measure, but this time it was the governor who rejected it.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Hochul announcing an executive order this week to revive plans for 8,500 units of affordable housing in the Gowanus section of Brooklyn, says the Senate and Assembly forced her hand on using the order to address the problem.
The legislature was not ready for it and would not commit at the time to the transformative change that New Yorkers so desperately need and deserve.
Hochul's order restarts affordable housing projects that were halted when a special tax break for developers known as 421A expired in 2022. The governor, who also blamed lawmakers for letting that program run out, says the new arrangement mirrors what 421A offered to developers.
I will not wait. This neighborhood will not wait. And the state of New York will not wait. So I'm going to do everything I can within my powers, using every tool I can find, the ones I'm announcing today and the ones we haven't even thought of yet. We're going to jumpstart housing now.
Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, in a statement, responded to Hochul's criticism, saying, "We still have a great deal of work ahead of us to address New York's housing crisis." Hastie says that means providing tenant protections along with increased affordable housing. And he says Assembly Democrats are ready to work with Hochul to get that done. The governor's actions are backed by, among others, the powerful Building Service Workers Union SEIU 32BJ. In another executive order, Hochul ordered all state agencies and authorities to take an inventory of their properties to see if they are suitable for conversion to affordable housing. She says she's already identified 2 sites, one at the former state prison in Fishkill and another on land adjacent to the Javits Center in Manhattan. And in another action, localities can be designated a pro-housing community if they meet certain requirements, like easing their permitting and zoning processes. In return, they'd receive priority for $650 million in state funding that's available.
Communities that do their part to build housing will get priorities for funding over those who will not. How do you like that?
Not everyone is happy with the governor's actions. State Senator Jessica Ramos tweeted that the announcement lacks any guarantee of labor standards. The Plumbers and Gas Fitters Union, in a statement, called the governor's plan a slap in the face to union members, and they panned the executive orders as disappointing and stopgap. The New York Building Congress, which includes major developers and related industries, offered conditional support, saying in a statement that even incremental progress is welcome. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
5 North Country airports are getting almost $9 million in combined federal funding. Senators Charles Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand announced late last week that 13 airports across New York State would be receiving over $27 million to make their facilities safer and more modern. The North Country airports included in that list are Lake Placid, Malone Dufort, Adirondack Regional, Watertown International, and Plattsburgh International. They'll receive a combined $9 million. They'll use it on things like equipment, fencing, and runway guidance systems. Plattsburgh is getting the most money. It's putting that towards repairing multiple runways and taxiways.
Senator Schumer is also pushing for $20 million from the Department of Defense to improve Watertown's water infrastructure. In 2018, the EPA flagged the Watertown public water system for not complying with certain safety standards of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Even though the city made changes to the system, the amount of contaminants in the water still exceeds what's considered acceptable for safe drinking water. Schumer wrote to the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd J. Austin, asking him to consider Watertown's request for funding. The money would come from the Defense Communities Infrastructure Pilot Program. If the request is approved, the city can make upgrades to the water system to be in compliance with EPA standards, making drinking water healthier for both residents of Watertown and Fort Drum.
Taste of Malone raised $45,000 to combat childhood hunger this summer. The Taste of Malone is an annual community fundraiser hosted by the Fieldstone Foundation to support the Backpack Program. The Backpack Program sends food home with kids to make sure they don't go hungry over the weekend where they can't get meals provided by the school. 11 restaurants in Malone participated by donating a percentage of their sales revenue to the Backpack Program. The event raised $45,000 in total, sponsoring 33 kids in the Backpack Program. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. In just a minute, how childhood visits to a local nature center shaped one young woman's love for the natural world and birding. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note coming up at 8:42. But first, Todd has a look at the weather for us.
A hot and muggy week on tap. We could see highs near 90 on Thursday and Friday. Temperatures today in the low 80s, increasing clouds and about a 70% chance of showers, an isolated thunderstorm mainly this afternoon and tonight. Lows overnight around 60, and then tomorrow about a 20% chance of lingering showers on Tuesday. Partly to mostly sunny Wednesday, and partly cloudy with a chance of showers Thursday. Temperatures are going to rise into the 80s again, a high near 90 on Thursday and Friday. Right now, 68 degrees and sunshine here in Canton.
Along with a team of professional scientists, the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation in Saranac Lake relies on a crew of student interns to monitor loons on the region's waterways. Emily Boris is an education and outreach intern this summer. She grew up in Connecticut and is a junior majoring in environmental biology at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse. At SUNY ESF, she is the president of the school's birding club.
As part of our ongoing series on birds and birding, I caught up with Emma, who told me she discovered her love for wildlife and birds at Earth Place Nature Center in Connecticut, where she worked as a preschool teacher, summer camp counselor, and animal care technician. She is excited to be working with loons this summer.
My love of birds first started really in preschool. I went to a preschool at a nature center close to my home. And we would have little animal programs. They have a bunch of rescued animals and kind of surrendered domesticated animals like bunnies and turtles. And they have a whole birds of prey exhibit. So they have eagles and owls and every animal you can imagine. And then when I was in fourth grade, I finally got to volunteer with the animals and just kind of prepare their food and do little tasks like that. And I kept volunteering throughout middle and high school. And got to do that job as an animal technician. I knew that I wanted to work with nature, and SUNY College of Environmental Science just does that. They're only into environmental science, and I loved that about them. And so that was the only school I applied to, and I'm really, really happy there. I just finished my first year there, and I got an internship with the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation.
Some birders have what they call a spark bird, which is the bird that kind of gets them that does get them interested in birding. Is there a spark bird for you, or is it just sort of, birds in general?
I'd have to say all the birds that were at my nature center. It's called Earth Place Nature Center in Connecticut. They had 2 bald eagles. They're still there, Chatty and Serena. They have a great horned owl named Ladybird. They have a raven named Edgar. He was pretty cool. If I had to pick one, I would pick Eastern Screech Owl.
Eastern Screech Owl. Okay.
Yeah, they're a smaller owl.
Yeah.
And they're really cute.
Have you had a chance to study loons yet this summer? Is that also sort of part of the program? Is a chance for you to head out on the water and maybe help with some of the research?
Yes. So the main research that we've been doing so far is just simply monitoring different lakes. And so I'll go out on a kayak with my binoculars and look for loons or their nests. Loons nest on the shoreline because they can't really walk. They're diving birds, and so their legs are really, really far back on their bodies, which makes them excellent divers, but they are not able to walk on land, kind of like ducks can. Once we know where the nests are, we'll kind of check up on them, see if the eggs have hatched, see if the chicks are still there, and kind of record that every few weeks just to make sure everyone's okay.
What do you think you would like to do once your studies are finished? It sounds like visiting a nature center when you were young had a big impact on your college career and so on. Mm-hmm. Do you see yourself working at a nature center and trying to sort of instill that love of the outdoors and birding in, that sort of next generation of birders?
I'm sure I'm going to wind up doing something like that. I can't see how I wouldn't. I really, really love that. Aspect of this job is teaching children about nature.
It must be an amazing experience. You grew up in Connecticut, going to school in Syracuse, and you get to spend the summer in the Adirondacks on the water and in the woods.
Yes, and I wouldn't be able to do it if it weren't for my friend and her parents. I want to thank them. My friend and my future roommate grew up in Saranac Lake, and her parents are letting me stay with them. It's very, very hard to find housing. So thank you, Nancy and Alan. Just want to give a shout out.
Emma, anything that I didn't ask that you want to sort of talk about in terms of your love of birds, the, conservation, the environment?
So some of the challenges that loons face are lead tackle and fishing line. They get fishing line entanglement. So sometimes when you're fishing, and I'm sure this has happened to many people, many anglers, it certainly happened to me. You either lose a line and like a fish pulls away and it snaps, the line snaps off with the fish still attached to it and the hook still attached to the fish, or a fish swallows a hook and you just kind of snap it off. Maybe fishing line is left in the water. And if a loon eats a fish with either tackle still in it, still attached to it, with a fishing line still attached to it, it will wrap around, the fishing line will get wrapped around the loon's face. And if it closes on the bill, then the loon won't be able to eat and it'll starve. So we have put fishing line recycling containers all throughout different boat launches in the area, and we urge people to use those. We also have a lead tackle buyback program, and you can find more information about that on our website. And this program allows people to return lead to different bait shops. We have certain participating bait shops. And if you return an ounce or more of lead tackle, then we will give you a $10 voucher to use towards non-lead tackle or safe fishing equipment, which is a really good deal because lead tackle is worth less than that. So you're kind of making money off of that. And lead tackle, if a loon swallows anything lead-based, they will die. So we just want to get as much of that out of the environment as possible.
Emma Boris is an education and outreach summer intern at the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation in Saranac Lake. And there is a link with more info about the Loon Conservation Center on our website, ncpr.org. And tell us your birding story. Email us, radio@ncpr.org.
Going out on a little bit of music now from the group performing at the Norwood Village Green Summer Concert Series this Thursday. This is the group Trace Souls from Los Angeles. They sing classic bolero from Mexican films of the 1930s and 40s. All shows are by donation. It starts at 7 o'clock this Thursday. This is their song, La Luna Eres Tú.
En tu reflejo, donde brotan mis sueños eternos, muy hondo es el amor que te tengo y no vivo sin ti. Porque me traes como la luna trae a los mares, y si yo soy el mar admirable, la luna eres tú.
Mire usted, señorita, hay cosas que nada más con tocarlas sangran. ¿Me entiende usted? Esta es una de ellas.
Cuando oscurece, tú me embrujas con tu intensa mirada.
That's Northern Light for this Monday. It's the 24th of July.
Morning Edition continues in just a minute. Then join us at lunchtime today for a conversation with author Colson Whitehead. After writing 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning novels, he started writing crime novels set in Harlem. His newest title, Crook Manifesto, delves into the world of crime in the 1970s at every level, from small-time crooks to Harlem's elite. That conversation coming up between noon and 1 o'clock right here on North Country Public Radio. Till tomorrow, I'm Monica Sandreski.
I'm Todd Moe. Be well.